feel like every girl who grows up obsessed with books dreams of being an author. And I was no different. I regularly told people I was going to be a bestseller, in between also telling them I was going to marry into the British royal family, move to Mars, or be a lawyer, or occasionally all three. I was a very multi-dream child here. However, it is years and years later, and you will never guess who still has a dream of becoming a novelist. Hey there, I'm Ellie, and this is my channel where we talk about history and literature, and now my journey to become a historical fiction author. Definitely join me on this, because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm excited to be doing it. Okay, guys, here's the backstory of this novel series I'm working on. So, the scene was December 2016. It's cold and rainy outside, and I'm inside reading. I was like really in my classic literature era, right? I'm like reading Austen and Gaskell. I'm reading all these great classic literature pieces, which on one hand is awesome and amazing, and you can learn so much for them. On the other hand, it sets the standards like so ridiculously high, guys, right? And so I think even though I had always wanted to write novels, I just knew I would never write a novel as well as like Jane Austen could, right? And I think mentally that was holding me back from writing. But then in December 2016, I ended up reading like this YA trilogy. I don't know if like I got it cheap at the thrift store or what happened, like how I ended up reading this, because like I almost never read books like that. But for some reason, while I was reading it, I was like, I could write this. This is attainable. Like I'm capable of doing this. I'm not saying like I'll do it as well as this author did, but like it felt like it gave me the mental permission to write books that were just fun and that I wanted to write and that didn't have to live up to Jane Austen. Which, massive disclaimer here, guys. If you ever read my book, it's not going to live up to Jane Austen. She was genuinely like a brilliant master of the craft that I don't know if any other writer has ever lived up to. I might be slightly biased. Slightly biased, but I genuinely believe that. Like, and the more I've studied her work, the more I'm like, yeah, I'm never matching up. No one's really ever matching up. But that's okay, because we don't have to. More realistic expectations, guys. So this YA trilogy gives me, like, hope that I can write a book and it can be decent and I can publish it and I can fulfill my dream of being an author. So, you know what I start doing? I start writing. Like, I wrote the entire book trilogy in like a month or a month and a half. I just sat there and I wrote, guys, and I wrote and I wrote. And I had such a great time doing it. It's like, even looking back on it, like, it was a fun little month. And like my kitten, Katai, was like a little cute kitten and she'd just like come over and like hang out with me while I write and stuff. Yeah. And it's really interesting because after I wrote the books is when I started doing like a little bit more research for them. Like as I was writing, I'd like Google things. I would get a good basic idea of like what should be happening in this, I would say, Victorian inspired world. Like that's what my books are set in, is like an alternate Victorian timeline if some things in history had gone down slightly differently. And also just me kind of being like, I want it to be Victorian-esque, but also I want to do whatever I want, right? Anyway, but like I was still like researching things, and it's so funny because then like 6 months later, in like June or July of 2017 is when I launched this channel. And one of my first videos is actually like the titles of English lords. And that entire video research was actually just originally research for this book, right? Like, so I just took that research and I turned it into a video. And so you could say like this whole channel in many ways is a direct outworking of me like writing this book way back then. However, since then, obviously this channel has done well. What has this book been doing? Well, It spent a lot of time like on my hard drive just sitting there, but there's been several times that I was like, I'm going to revise it and try to get it published, and so it's gone through several revisions. But I feel like it needs one final revision that I actually started a couple of years ago, like the final revision. And I got 30% through the book. And so like the first 30% of book 1 is in a state that I would feel comfortable either like sending out to agents, or if I self-publish, like hiring an editor to go through. But like what I need to work on right now is doing that final revision of the other 70% of the book. So that's the status of this novel. And it's fascinating to be revising a book that I wrote when I was so much younger. And it's kind of embarrassing to see all of the traits that the main character has that now I recognize as that was younger me in many ways. And now that I've grown and I've changed as a person, I'm like, why? Why younger me were you like that? And also, why did you write a character with so many of these traits? But it's given me a lot to think about when it comes to revising books that you wrote when you were younger, when you are older. Like, how much do you change? How much do you keep? Do you keep the story true to what you originally wrote, even though now you're such a more mature writer that would write an entirely different story? And it made me think a lot about Jane Austen and how she wrote Pride and Prejudice when she was actually quite young, potentially in her late teens or her early 20s. But it didn't get published until she was quite a bit older in her life. Austen has two main eras in her works, the young works such as Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Northanger Abbey, that have qualities like youth, full hope and zest, and they see the world much differently from her older works, which are of course things like Emma and Mansfield Park and Persuasion. And they are a lot more mature and have a slightly more complex view of happiness. But what's so fascinating to me is that all 6 of her novels were published in relatively rapid succession in her older life, which means she was that mature writer capable of writing Mansfield Park when she was doing the final revisions on Pride and Prejudice. But she didn't scrap it and turn it into a Mansfield Park, but rather she let it keep that youthful spirit and energy and just really stay true to what she originally wrote. And so as I revise my novel, I'm trying to make the writing better, but at the same time, I'm doing everything I can to try to keep the original spirit and heart as true to what younger me wrote as possible. The UPS guy is here. Are you bringing me a package? There's nothing sadder than the UPS guy just like passing your house. Which, I mean, I'm happy my neighbor's getting a package, but it's just a sad moment, guys. So I finally finished reading Pride and Prejudice in space. Now, this is one of those books that's not out yet. And don't we all love that when YouTubers do that? It's like, go buy this thing. It's not even available yet. But it comes out next month in October. I think like the 15th or like somewhere in the middle of October. I highly, highly recommend it. And this is coming from someone who genuinely dislikes the majority of Pride and Prejudice retellings or like spin-offs. I don't read them almost ever. Like the fact that I accepted this was like just crazy and out there for me. Because like I do have authors reaching out to me like wanting me to read their books, and like I usually say no to like 99% of them. But something about this, and I'm not gonna lie, like the cover itself, and the idea and like the synopsis, I was just like, I have to read that. And I am so glad I did, because it is by far one of the best versions of Pride and Prejudice I've ever read. So basically what it does is it takes the plot line of Pride and Prejudice and stays very, very true to it. It reminds me of the 1995 Pride and Prejudice adaptation, where it's taking the majority of like the original dialogue from the book. Right? And there's definitely places where she's updating the dialogue so that it's more understandable to modern audiences by like changing a word or two or a phrase. But other than that, it stays incredibly close to what Jane Austen originally wrote in that way. While at the same time, it's balancing staying true to the story with just really great world building. And it made me feel like I was rediscovering the story all over again, like for the first time, which you guys know how much I'm obsessed over Pride and Prejudice. Like that's a kind of tall order to do. But like, because she was setting the story in like these different like sci-fi situations and like adapting it to this interesting hybrid culture of where it's a lot of Regency era inspired culture, from the way they dress to the way they talk to the way their houses are decorated, combined right with technology, and they live on like something called a lunar system. Basically, it's like the series of moons and also like space stations that orbit them is the overall setting of the story. But like the way she did it, it was like very comfortable. I always knew what was going to happen next because it does follow Pride and Prejudice so closely. But at the same time, I was like always so curious to know what would happen next because she kept doing the story I know so well, but in such a new and fascinating way. Other cool thing about it is that there are like a ton of illustrations in it. Now I have like the advanced reader copy, which is usually like it's printed on cheaper paper, and also like any illustrations are in black and white versus in the final version of this thing, it should be in color. And I'm just like, I want to get the real version when it comes out because I want to see these things in color because they're like really cool in black and white, but I'm like, I bet like it would be next level in color. But I also love because they'll have like texting conversations between the characters, diary entries. And the author of this book is also the illustrator of this book. And so she's got some serious skills here. I'm just like being able to write this well and draw this well and world build this well is like incredibly, incredibly impressive. Anyway, I told you guys I would give you a review of this and it far exceeded my expectations. I loved it so much. Like, guys, I'm like obsessed with how like Mr. Darcy's first proposal goes down. Like, I want this to be a movie because it would be so cool. Anyway, okay, I need to stop fangirling over Pride and Prejudice in space. Anyway, this is coming out next month. Definitely check it out. I don't know if anyone will love it as much as me, but I am genuinely obsessed with it. Also, links down in the description. I earned commission off of sales and it was gifted to me. All the FTC disclaimers here. But I really loved reading this book. And I also read another one I need to review for you guys at some point in an upcoming video. But reading these books by like modern authors, I think reignited that in me, that belief I had back in 2016 that I'm like, I can write my novel and I can get it published. And like, it kind of inspired me to start working on this novel series again. Anyway, I do feel like over the past year, I've worked through so many different like anxieties and like writer block issues when it comes to this book. And now I'm like ready to keep working on my series and try to get it published. And I'm just like, I'm so excited because I do think it was like a mental headspace that was blocking me for a lot of this time period, which I kind of want to share with you guys more about because I know so many of you are also writers and might be struggling with the same things. But for right now, I need to end this video and actually go write. Anyway, how are you guys all doing? I hope you're having an awesome and fantastic day and keep being awesome because you're awesome.